Hey everybody, I am Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today I'd like to show you how to do some fun, whimsical landscapes in watercolor. These are going to be short little studies, but they're going to be whimsical and they're going to be fun, and they're going to be something that once you get the techniques, you can continue on in them and make your own original landscapes. So let's just get started. All right, I have here a 9 by 12 block. This is a watercolor block of Fabriano cold press 140-pound watercolor paper. In watercolor paper, my recommendation is that you've got to have at least 140 pounds. I personally like cold press just because it gives me a lot of options and just the kind of texture and puddling and effects that I like in my watercolor. If you're a very crisp, orderly painter, you might enjoy hot press, which gives you much smoother edges. However, I like the painterliness of this, especially for these landscapes, so we're going to go that way. I have here the Qor mini watercolor set, and it has like a little list of colors. I'll definitely put those in the description so you can know what those are. But any approximation, especially with these types of landscapes, it's much more important than the specific color that you see the value, how light or dark it is, and the techniques. And I'm going to start out with just a free-handed kind of event here. So I'm going to dip my number 8 round. This is a number 8 round black velvet in watercolor. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how watercolor works. I'm going to get a little of my nickel azo. Come here and begin the light of my sky. In watercolor, the pigment goes where the water is. I am about a third of the way up and I'm putting some brush strokes down that I'm bending. And you'll notice that as I move forward and I touch new paint in there, any place that the paper is wet, the watercolor will travel and be very whimsical. Any place that the paper is dry, the water doesn't go, the pigment doesn't go, it all stays super stable. I'm going to come in here and get a little bit of my little orange red here. This is actually a Pyrrole orange, but you could use like any orange actually, cat orange, any of those. Just something that's bright and cheerful and warm. You can see I am kind of bending the brush strokes here, and this is going to give this sort of a fisheye effect on the landscape that I'm going to do. Notice that this is very loose. My sky will be lightest at the horizon, and then it's going to kind of deepen up as I move up. Now, this one I want to have it be a very low landscape, so I'm still sort of working this down. In this, I don't expect to glaze much. Glazing is where I put the color over a color that's dry, and then it kind of is like doing cellophane layers, right? Like layering cellophane over. The other thing to remember when you're doing watercolor, I'm going to get into my magenta now, which you can see is a much cooler red and very different than the colors before it. And then here where it was sort of dry, you can see it's holding its edge. And then as I come up, it definitely is bleeding out. And then I'm going to take a little of my magenta and mix it with some dioxazine. So I get a slightly warmer purple. And again, you can see me being loose. So with the watercolor, what you'll see is besides when you put the paint down, it's going to continue to settle or soften. And so if you're trying to decide if something worked or if you need more there, you almost need to wait a bit and see how the artwork is settling for yourself. I'm going to come here and put a little dark edge underneath that. Where it's towards the center, I'm always going to come in and add a bit of my yellow. Glazing some here, glazing some there. So it's kind of a nice little sunset effect, and I'm going to do a little land. Now, underneath the yellow, I'm going to add more yellow. We will definitely bring this through here with a lot more of this nickel azo yellow. But as I come out here and I get into my sap green, I will carry this forward, and what that's going to do is make it seem like there's this focus of light towards the center. And just bringing this along. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Just pull your brush along. I do work most of my paintings on the toe or about the beginning of the belly to the toe, just because that's going to give me a lot of control over what's happening. Now, if I want to create a little more depth, I'm going to come from the side with a lot more pigment. And you can see that the pigment is very loaded. Again, sap green. You could use phthalo green. It doesn't really matter. You could use, you know, hooker's green, any green that you're fond of. Bamboo green, though that would be a very bright green. Sometimes it's nice to know what colors, you know, specifically make you very happy. Coming along here. I'm going to get back into my Ozo and just go over this here just to make sure that the landscape is a bit yellow. And it's the lightest right there, right? Now, on this outside edge here, I'm going to go ahead and I've got just the toe. I'm going to make some loose little distant bushes. And I'm just wiggling the brush up and down. And you can see that the big trick that you want to avoid back out in this range is not doing what's called cloning. And that's where you just sort of repeat the exact same shapes over and over again. You want to make sure that, especially in natural objects, that there's a bit of a randomness about it so that they feel more authentic. Now understand, we're not doing any reference. We're just using our basic sort of landscape techniques to think about how we construct a landscape in a painting. And you can touch the little brush up and down to imply distant little bushes. Get a little more pigment and let some of it darken up. Let's pull that there. Again, very nice. Now, if you want, come back with some pure yellow and, you know, just dot this out here in that nickel Ozo. So it's like this dark yellow that's kind of deepening, and make it spotting. I am going up and down. You can do this in any color combo that you want. We're going to do several of these, and I think you're going to be surprised at how they give us these great little studies to work from. I'm going to get into the orange, and here towards the center, I'm going to just tap up and down a little bit of the orange to sort of imply maybe a little bit in this field. There's a bit of an orange flowering. And you can see where the paint is wet, leads into the green, and it gives you some lovely halftones. You're doing really good. Then I can come back, like say, with some quinacridone and maybe a little Diox purple. And come under here, and I'm going to make a bit of a dark kind of top here. This would be like maybe where I'm thinking about some darker sunset clouds that have happened, and I can just do some cloud shapes to that. Like right here. And you can see that just adds something. And you can always come underneath just to say, oh, the sun is underneath this, with a little bit of yellow to brighten it. Right? Saying, oh, it's a little bit underlit. And just do some almost calligraphy marks up here to imply little stratus fellows. They're sort of loose and they're light. And then if you want, so as you're going, you can come back with your brush and lighten up any of the pigment here towards the end. so that it's dark and it's happening, but it's very cloud-like. I'm going to come back with some of my green, and maybe I'll let my sap green and my phthalo blue come together. And this outside edges, I'm going to go ahead and add this deeper, cooler layer, and it will create a whole nother sense of what's happening in the landscape. Whenever I am very stressed out, I like to do these little watercolor landscapes because for me, they're like a walking meditation. They let my mind go and let my stress go, and I can just let everything flow into the pigment on the canvas. I will come here and just all the little dark marks there, as if a different little hill thing is afoot. And it just adds layers, doesn't it? And this will only get better and better. So that's painting number 1 of 4. Hopefully you're feeling kind of warmed up. Don't let this get you too much. The outcome is, it's lovely, but it's not really the point of the process, right? All right. So this one here, I think I'm going to maybe go a different direction, and I'll get it wet first. I'm going to go ahead and come above here. I'm going to do an even lower landscape, I think. Oh yeah, that low. That's how low it's going to be. So this will all be sky, and I am getting the paper damp, not soaking wet. It should have a noticeable sheen, but not look like fish can swim in it. And I'm going to start out with a bit of my ultramarine, and you can see I'm just letting this come into the water, and you can see the bloom that happens. This is what I love about watercolor, is it just so amazing in how it does that. A little pink, and come here and just add a bit of a pink. It's like a hint. Little hint of pink. And you got to move quickly enough that the paper is going to stay moist enough for this to continue to happen, and I will get stronger in my brush strokes, more confident. You can see I'm moving the brush along, but I'm leaving some of the area white. And then as I'm moving up, I'm going to get into my Payne's gray. Excuse me. Getting into my Payne's gray. Maybe even some of my phthalo. That was I still had some green in there, so that got in there, but I'm not particularly worried about it because the most it's going to do is kind of become a turquoise. You can even tap your brush down to get some little splatters. These are little effects that you can get in your watercolor where you can just be like, oh, I'm going to be whimsical. You can smooth anything out if you need to. I like to leave a few of these in because I think that they just create a sense of wonder in the piece. I'm going to come underneath here and just deepen some of this up because it's sort of a stormy sky. And to that end, I'll bring a little of my green into my Payne's gray. Little green, a little Payne's gray. And a little more Payne's gray along this edge here. Coming in. Very simple little sky landscape. Kind of a prairie plain happening. going to along some of this, and even while it's damp, so it's going to continue to soften out, but I want to give some structure or some lines that has that kind of cloud feel to it. Tap this in. And then if I want to, I can come here and add a little bit of dark. Play with it. It's like a doodle. I'm on the tip of the brush. Now I'm going to put a little gray out and a little ultramarine. I'll kind of make a Payne's gray. And right here, I'm going to take the tip of my brush, make 2 upward lines, put a little triangle over them, parallel the roof line, and I'm going to begin the idea that there's a little house. You like that? The idea that there's a little house kind of in this space. And let's go ahead and take a little of our green and a little of our Payne's gray. And I want to make a bit of maybe like a pine line. So while the house is having a dry, I'm going to tap up a little line. How I get the pines is I just tap the brush up and down. The pine shape is essentially a very elongated triangle, right? So the branches that are low tend to be wider than the branches at the top. And it's pretty fun and easy to paint those little shapes out. Like that, especially in a distant landscape. Just little toes. There we go. Those little tree shapes far away. We put a little tree between these two because you want it to feel a little crowded and a little natural. And I'll, you know, lower those down there. I'm not going to do the same on the other side. I want this to be sort of a stark landscape. I'm going to get into my Pyrrole red here. I'm going to make the roof red. So it's a red little roof. And then I'm going to get into that Payne's gray, which again is the ultramarine blue and a little, well, Payne's gray, because we have the Payne's gray here, but I want to make it like even more with the blue. So here we come underneath here. That's just the front of this will be the lighter one. And then as we come back, one more pigment under the house. And to the side, we'll do the darker version. You can always make a little shadow under the roof. Get a little more of the red. Pull that out. Because it's nice when the little house is very red. I'm going to be honest. Just kind of a nice touch. And tap some of those little bushes along there. So that's a nice little natural landscape. I'm going to get a bit of my yellow. I'm going to put it right over the gray. So it's never going to get bright. It'll be a bit of a glow. It'll be a little bit. A bit of that right there. And I may grab some of my sort of lemon yellow light and come right here. Not like a gouache, but still pretty thick over it. I'll add some of this to this part of the landscape, creating a little pop of light. Always nice to do. So that one worked out really, really well. Now here I get to do something completely different. And in this one, I'm going to bring this line across here. And I'm going to get the center sort of wet before I even begin. I'm going to actually start on the land before I begin. And I'm going to grab a little of my nickel azo yellow and I'm going to tap out some of this light color, very light, at the center. This will be the only time I get to do that where it's very light at the center. So I want to make sure that that stays light at the center. And then I'll get maybe I'm going to take my Pyrrole and my quinacridone. I'm going to just tap these little pinks in. You can see they're doing a beautiful job of blooming and being very whimsical. I'm in tapping some of that nickel azo here towards the outside. Still quite bright. Right? Still quite bright as we are wandering it through. You can get this color in oil. You can get this color in acrylic. You can get this color in watercolor. Though some of the more traditional paint colors and oils and acrylics are hard. I mean, oils and watercolor are hard to get in acrylic. There we go. Look how lovely that is. So that's just sitting there and it's going to rest for a second. I really need this to dry so that I can do the next kind of very whimsical sky part. One thing I can do right now is create the keyhole of light that I'm going to be using. So you see me brushing back and forth in a curve. I'm not going to touch the water to the land though, because if I did, it's going to absolutely blend into that. And I'm going to get the very bright yellow I have and come here to the center. You can see it's a little bit different and I will hold that there for a second. Let's come in and we'll mimic what we see in the flowers here. Not touching the sky yet to the land in any way. Now I'm going to get into my phthalo blue. But the phthalo blue had some green in it and it had some Payne's gray. So it's almost become a marine blue. But as I keep painting into it, it's going to go more and more phthalo. You'll notice that I'm being quite dark. Right here, I'm going to pull a little bit of color out. I do want it to be. Bring this all the way up to the top. And let's get, again, a little bit of the green into the blue. And heavy pigment up here. And this is getting dry now, so I can work this area. I'm going to mix the ultramarine and the phthalo blue, and I'll come down. And this is like that kind of cloudy day where there's just a bit of something afoot there. I'm going to pull little bits of these darker clouds in, so it's creating a keyhole, right? Light pulling in there. In amongst the clouds. Along here. Now we have a bit of that. And while that's still there, I'm going to grab my nickel. And I'm going to come up here and add it to this part of the sky, which is super nice. But with a clean brush, I'm going to come back and soften some of it. You see pulling that through there. It's just very special. Get some stronger pink and come back and glaze that in. So this starts to make quite a special type of very colorful sky. You'll notice the strokes are curving. I'm working the toe. I'm pretty confident glazing because I know that, especially in watercolor, it just is beautiful. Bring some of that up there. And I like that very much. So now I have this very bright center. And I'm going to take a bit of my green and phthalo blue. And I'll come and get that sort of bush line there. Might be happening. Phthalo blue and green. I'll stop there. I will pull this down. As you can see, we are still doing quite nice. Pull this down on this side. Make it very random. Get on that toe. There you go. This is good. This is good. So, get into your quinacridone. Let's get some of this darker pink out into that turquoise, which is going to go pink, purple, pink, purple. I'm going to tap this in here. A little more quinacridone, as you do. This is a flower field. I'm going to grab a little of my nickel azo and my yellow. Start working that brighter green at the horizon. More yellow every time I get into it, so it's definitely lightening and going more yellow. And continue to pull that down and play with that, right? Play with it down here. See, you've got that nice little center going on. I'm going to grab a little more of that yellow and let that come in even now here into what's happening. Because again, what are we talking about? We're talking about a flower field. And we're just enjoying that flower field. I'm going to make my dark green again. Little watercolor landscapes. Little watercolor landscapes. Very excited about this. Now in the center, I definitely want to get some of my lighter green. I'm going to tap that here. I don't mind that that's going to go a few places. I like when it gets on the hard areas and the wet areas so that everything is sort of blended. Anywhere I want to smooth those dots out, I just grab them. You can always put a towel down if there's an area that you don't want splattered. I don't really... In these, the exercise is about their creation. A little more of that lemon yellow through here. And it's okay if it picks up some of the other colors because we are keeping it quite light in the center. And that's the goal. So there's this light in the clouds. And then what we're seeing is a light in the center. Now I'm going to come around this cloud form with this strong yellow. And the cloud form, you can tell, has formed through that blooming sort of naturally. And what you'll find is in your paintings often, there are shapes that are doing that. And if you let them dry and maybe wait a second, you'll be able to take advantage of those and create some really unexpected skies. And then one of the fun things that you can do from this is you can take this into another medium or another painting to use your little watercolor landscape as a reference. What? I know. So that's what's happening here. I think these are good. Let's keep going. These just wonderful natural scapes. It's like the light kind of escaped up into here and got into that, right? And then if you come along in your pink, you can do almost a similar thing through here. You just find where you feel like the cloud form is and you just doodle it. I know, really cool, right? I love doing these little watercolors because they always just give back to me in this like wonderful way. Now I can always come in and get a little bit of my just red. I'll put some of these just red flowers here. What? From the Pyrrole red, you say? Yes, I say, from the Pyrrole red. Just tapping the brush up and down. Sometimes they'll bleed together. Sometimes they'll be very individual dots, but I think what you'll find is that overall, you start to get something quite playful and charming and dynamic. And can you believe in this amount of time, we have done 4 little landscapes. And this is just a great way to warm up, or if you're ever stuck. I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you're creatively stuck or stifled and you don't really know what to paint. And you're just feeling like, you know, if you don't have a plan, you can't get any creativity done. But if you do something like this, I think what you'll find is that there's a lot that you can do, like a lot, and you're really going to like it. Now here, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do something really interesting. I'm going to get my brush, and it's wet. And I think I'm going to start mid part of the landscape, and I'm going to have a thin line that I wiggle back and forth. The brush is just wet. And I wiggle this back and forth. As I'm coming forward, I'm going to kind of thicken it out and then trim it out again. Now I'm going to get some of my yellow. I'm going to just touch it a few places. All right, just touch it a few places. And then I'm going to get some of my orange. Touching again, just a few places. And then I'll get some of my strong red. And you can see it's just very flowing. And if I have too much water, I can pick it up with a brush if I use a paper towel and pick it up. Because I got to the point where fish were swimming in it. I don't really care, but they were. I had to stop. Little fish got swimming in it. Now I'm going to come across here. Back and forth. You can see I'm just wandering back and forth. That's very lovely there. Grab my lightest yellow. Back and forth. Get into my bright deep nickel azo yellow. Really the difference is this is a cool yellow and this is a warm yellow. That's what we're talking about here. Cool yellow, warm yellow, and this is how they play against each other. Sometimes in watercolor you can easily see why you do a thing in acrylic or other mediums, because the obviousness of like the bias of the paint starts to become real evident, because you're always going over white paper. You're always seeing kind of a clear, respectful version of that color. I come here, just come across the top, and I want it to bloom down. I want it to do exactly what it's doing. Isn't that fun? I'm just going to let it do that. And come along this here. I'm going to take the toe of my brush, back and forth along this little edge of our initial wiggle. Maybe here too. So you can see it's quite distant and it goes back a ways. I'm going to get back into my fabulous, fabulous nickel yellow. Pull some color two ways. Let's say I will use all of it, but I've given myself what I would say is a bit of room to play, and I got to figure out how I want to play in this particular environment. I think I'm going to grab some gray. Come across here. Right across. Keep the gray. Let's keep doing the gray. Have a nice little fantasy landscape. A little more gray, maybe. Perhaps a little more gray. This is nice. Just wind a little bit here. A little more of that yellow. This nice little gray thing. So it kind of is like bleeding down, and there's this little sort of crazy wiggle. It could be lava at this point. It could be a lot of things at this point, but I have kind of an idea of where I'm thinking of going with this. You know, do I want to make this extraordinarily distant? Do I want to shorten the space by changing like some object ratios? You know, how do I want to talk about this whole space? And I do need some of it to kind of rest and, you know, relax just a little bit. So I might grab some of my blue. Come in. I'm going to darken what hopefully is starting to look like maybe the edge of a shore. Pull this back, creating little random depths of landscape space. You know, if it's already wet, I can add some blue, and then where it's not wet when I add blue, it just stays there. And it's just starting to be a thing. Maybe I'll bring this much stronger down up here and across. And then I'm going to come from the right-hand side with even more blue and really, really make that very strong. There we go. That looks pretty good. We'll let that have a rest. And I'll come along. So you'll see me, hear me say that a lot. Let that have a rest. In watercolor, definitely always make time to let something rest. To let something relax and soften and you know, mellow out. A little more blue. You know, and I can take a little gray and a little blue. You can make sort of a distant little cool hillscape that's happening here. Let's do the same thing over here. I like that. Let's make a distant little hillscape. Just little playful bits. Little playful bits. A little more blue. And look, I just let it bloom up. And it starts to create its own little space. So making this quite dark over here, going around. You're starting to see what's happening, right? Now I might come along an edge here and there with a very dark value of Payne's gray. It's a nice little edge to that. Again, very just imaginative, working it out, watercolor, coming along the edge, dancing that there. And that's quite nice. Let's be playful along here a bit. Come along this little edge. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Dark color. So you've got your center. And what you're really seeing is it's like the colors of the sky are reflecting in this patch. And it just kind of makes your brain think maybe that's water. You know, maybe that's something that's running. I'm going to come here and make another little run of hills or something. All right, so that's a second layer of landscape that we're thinking about. And if I want to soften it, I just add more water, which lightens the color. I don't want to take it too far forward because I kind of like that light spot there. So you can see I'm just sort of making sure it's not going to travel too much. Make this a deeper and pull that forward. So see, this landscape is starting to just sort of develop out of our background. Come here with like a darker value across this little line here. Glaze over it, even deepening that. So now we've got kind of this forward-facing something that's happening, and I'm going to take a little of my dark color and I'm going to just think, add a little bit of grass stroke. It'll be in the soft spot. It'll be in the dry spot. So where it's dry, these little blades will feel very crisp. Where if it's wet, it'll bleed down into where it's wet, which is just the nicest little effect. If you need to darken that one up a bit, go ahead. I looked at it and it had lightened, so it wasn't feeling like it had pulled in a bit at all. And I'm darkening that so that the landscape is rushing down into whatever is happening here on this little stream. And I'm also sort of waiting for perhaps some of this to dry so that I have a crisp edge like through here, because I have kind of an idea of what I want to do. You can see where these little are, and then you peek out and there's still the stream. So that just creates this layering. So this now has become this forward-facing bit of land. Do you? And then I really like how that sort of washed down, and it's very experimental and kind of wonderful. Now I think I'm going to again change the depth of the piece, and like right now this is like a roaring river, and this is a very distant scape. If I were to say put a large like sequoia here, it changes the whole scale and our viewpoint of this landscape that we just sort of made up here. So that's kind of awesome, right? I'm going to get some of my green and I'm going to make a decision, and I'm making it, and I'm just going for it. Very often when I'm working, this is a thing that happens to me where I'm like starting one place, and then I think to myself, you know, it'd be really cool right now. So I'll have to do some stuff here to anchor this, and I'm going to start to maybe think about that with this bit of green here, where there's going to be something that anchors that, you know, next to this. Maybe this is a stream that just happened because there's a flash flood. Or darkening that. Right now it's just this finger of cactus that's just going up. But of course, you know, the minute you make that second arm, then all of a sudden it does start to feel like cactus, doesn't it? So I come up here and do one. Then I can just come in with the Payne's gray and darken some of this up. So it's not a silhouette. That's not what I'm quite doing, but it is got a lot of that in it. We're just putting this much more in shadow because it would be in shadow. And I'm going to add some dark grass here as well. Just paint that out. Now I've got that crazy shape afoot. Balance-wise, I feel like I would need something over here. And I'm also going to just make sure that there's a good break there for that arm that I'll work out in a second. So balance-wise, I feel like there should be something maybe over here. I'm going to just make a little mound of something closer. And I'll give it some grasses and some thoughts. And that will also, again, help change this depth. How big is the stream? What's in the stream? Is this like a stream that just appeared recently because there was some rain, which I think probably in the case of this it is. I'm going to maybe put a few little rocks there, little bits of something where, you know, the stream isn't, you know, devoid of landscape. Again, a little more darkness here. And then, you know, the fun stuff is you can come in and be like, some little distant bird shape out there, right? A bit of a bird. Right, just a few of them that are off in the distance. Pull that back up. Put some yellow back in there and pull that down. So that's nice to do sometimes, is to pull some of that stuff down and say, oh no, this is lighter, or this is heavier. Really whatever you want. I really can't tell you how much. It's whatever you want. It's whatever gives you joy, whatever makes you happy, whatever is your bliss within the painting. Because these are like, this is you just letting your inner kind of imagination and architecture out to be like, oh, you know, what am I thinking about? What kind of landscapes or colors or shapes or forms am I currently focusing on? And then what's really wonderful is that when you pull the washi tape, you really get to see 4 very distinctive little landscapes that are there, you know, that are definitely happening in the world. I'm wondering if here I want to do more layers, but I think for the purposes of today's exercise, we really sort of nailed it, right? Like, little painting doodle, little landscapes, little imagination, some tips for you. Skies have an infinite number of variations that you can see out there. But if you're not working from a reference, if you're working from imagination, there's a couple things that you can do to help them look a little more like skies. You can make sure that the horizons are a little lighter right here. And you can darken them as they go up. You can create little spots of light that implies that the sun is here. If you put a really focused bit of light, you know, remember to warm those up and cast a little light on them down. There's a lot you can do on your landscapes, making little random shapes to say bush, 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 bush. You can do little keyholes. If you have a keyhole of light in your sky, you can keyhole a light there, adding little structural objects. And the other thing I hope you got from this as we were working is the scale of things. This one especially, I feel, I've done a few lessons where I'm like, if I put an object this size in there, this is the landscape. If I change that, to see how the scale of a landscape might change depending on the objects that you put in it and how you arrange them in it. And these little moments can help you in your other painting exercises where you're like, you know, how would I tell this story? Where do I put these things? How do I represent it? these little moments can help you succeed more at that. I hope you really enjoyed today's lesson. I really enjoyed my time with you. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. And I want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.